Thank you so much for being here for this session. Um, I finished reading this Garden of Weeds on my flight a few weeks ago, and it is, for me, something that I've never come across before because this is a satire on the art world. And as someone who loves painting, who has artist friends, it was still a bit of a shocker. A lot of things that I learned about the art world in this book. One of the things that stood out for me about this Garden of Weeds was the metaphor about the garden itself. On the outside, the art world feels quite fancy, quite beautiful, but the closer you get to all these characters that Sanjay has written about, you realize that they're very human, very vulnerable. They come with their own insecurities, they come with their own flaws. And that is what, as a reader, I found very beautiful about this book because they were all three-dimensional characters and there were so many of them. And I could get into the heads of all of them because this book is written from many different perspectives. But to start with, Sanjay, I would love to know a bit about how you came up with this title, this Garden of Weeds.
Okay, for me to get a sense of the audience, how many of you have heard of Raja Ravi Verma? Okay, fair number. How many of you have heard of Surendran Nair? Two hands. So my first book came out in 2012, and it had the work of Surendran Nair on the cover. He's one of the best contemporary artists that we have, and he is from Trivandrum. Just for me to get a sense of where the audience is, I got introduced to the art world quite by chance. And I come from the field of finance, from management, and I stumbled into the art world pretty much by chance. Somebody gifted me artwork when they got married, and it was signed M.F. Hussain. And that got us excited and also a little embarrassed because why would somebody gift an M.F. Hussain for a wedding? So I had to ask the person, what did it cost you? And of course they said, we can't tell you because this is a gift. We're not supposed to tell you the price. The framer's label was there behind. We went to the framer and inquired, what did this actually cost? And it was just 1,800 rupees. And it was a limited edition work from the Varanasi series. Having stepped into the gallery for the first time in Chennai, I saw the show around me and I bought a work. And at that time, it cost me 8,000 rupees and it was a lot of money. The artist was Jogen Chowdhury. Jogen is one of our most famous artists today. But that for me was a step into the art world. I had stayed many years in Bombay and I had visited the Jahangir Art Gallery every Saturday to have beer and biryani. There was a restaurant there called Samovar. I would go there and have beer and biryani. That was my art introduction. I never saw a show in all the years that I was there in Bombay. Why is it that I'm telling you this story is that I would commend what happened to me. And my only way of trying to share what the art world can mean to you is by writing books and to indicate to you what this small incestuous world is all about. It is unlike anything that you people have seen or experienced, but I think it's a story that needs to be told. It's something that people need to read. I strongly believe that the aesthetic journey that we all have an aesthetic journey, believe me, whether you go to a gallery or not, you are aesthetic in a very personal way. The clothes you wear, the way you keep your house, everything that you have, the garden that you have perhaps, is an indication of what your aesthetic is. But there is something called an aesthetic journey, and that has to be, in some sense, a conscious decision, which is what happened to me. And the people who taught me were artists. One artist taught me the power of Dhrupad music. Dhrupad is a music form where the alap takes 45 minutes. Over 45 minutes, the artist describes a raga, and it tests your patience and your sense of time. Another artist introduced me to the poetry of Rilke. So artists took me under their wing and said, okay, this is a guy who comes from the finance world or the business world. And I had started the art gallery. We had become partners in the gallery in '88. We probably need to introduce him to what the other things are in life. The point I'm making is that for you to have a meaningful aesthetic journey, You need to start seeing cinema, not just films. Maybe read some poetry, listen to music of different kinds. You have to evolve in very many different ways before you arrive, perhaps, at what could be an appreciation of visual art. Visual art is something that you can do without in your life. You'll probably be none the worse, but you could be better. We have performing arts, which are very much part of our lives. There's dance, there's drama, music. All of that is part of our lives, but visual art is something where we have to make a conscious choice. So this is the background. This is my personal experience. So I wrote the first book in 2012, Artist Undone. It's looked at an outsider who stumbles into the art world and his life turns on his head. This particular book, why do I go back to this, is that I felt that there are many stories in the art world, and this one comes from the inside. It has a host of characters. The format that I had in mind was one of a play. This is a play that is being enacted. I don't know whether you got that sense, but we start with a cast of characters. A character after character comes at you. Somebody is a curator, somebody is an artist, somebody is a failed art critic, somebody is a performance artist. They all come at you one after the other, telling them who they are. And then there is a mise en scene, and then there are incidents that happen, and then there is something called curtains. I finish with curtains. So the idea is to have a theatrical look. And while there are very many characters, and I say in the beginning of the book itself that only one has an ending, the central character, some people feel is the city of Bombay. I feel it's the art world. For me, what I wanted to show you in this book is that this is the art world through the stories of various characters.
You know, I felt that. I didn't think that the main character, the protagonist, was Bombay as a city itself, but I did feel like it was a character too. The city felt like a character, and yes, the art world also felt like another character. Almost as if they were competing for, like the center stage. Also, back to aesthetic. You spoke about aesthetic, and I really wanted to understand there is a part in the book where one of the characters turns to the other character and says, "What do you think, Girish? Is this art?" And the other character says, Girish says, "Well, like anything that can be housed in a gallery is art." And this is something that I would love to pick your brain about. I would love to know what you think about what is art, and or rather, when does something become art, and why is it art? And also your thoughts on this sort of, some people say that everything is art, some people say no, not everything is. And do you think that that's just elitist gatekeeping, or do you think, no, that's true, there is some truth to that?
I think the most difficult question to answer is what is art? And I think it's important that this question remains unanswered. The best works of art that I've ever enjoyed in my life are those which remain unresolved. And when friends of mine approach a work of art, they want to know, what does this mean? What did the artist have in mind? What is the narrative? And when they look at abstract art, they want to know, what the F is this? So the point is, they want some sort of an explanation. It's as if a work of art needs a reason for its existence. That's the kind of mind frame that we enter into a gallery or at looking at a work of art. But the question, what is art, it is important, like a painting should remain unresolved, that that question remain unresolved, because that honestly is the quest. The undying quest, the eternal quest is what is art. And I have different characters across these two books talking about it in different ways as to what, according to them, is art. There is this Bania, who is a complete Philistine, who enters the art world and tries to shake it up. And he has no clue. He comes from a Bania background where, in Bania families, I come from one such, art is this marble Taj Mahal, this carved Emporio wall pieces, a nice sideboard which is filled with cut glass. This is our concept of art. If there's something on the wall, it's probably be something that my aunt painted and is very fond of. And that's what we frame very proudly and keep. So he comes from this kind of a background. So he's asked at the end of the book, what, according to you, is art? So he says, is this art? What it is, perhaps. So he also comes to some sort of realization that, this is a question which is very hard to answer. There are critics who answer it in a much better way. She says, art is a slow and gradual unraveling. What slips to the floor is camouflage. So that's a critic's way of putting it. I'll read out a small piece about, there's a character called Girish. Girish is supposed to be an art critic, but he fails. So he becomes a journalist. I'm not putting down journalists, but yeah. So Girish has this take on the art world. He lives under the shadow of the art critic called Anjana. And it's a shadow that he is very uncomfortable with, something that he hates. And his friend Krishna Kumar keeps telling him, impress her, because he's worried whether their relationship will last or not. So Krishna Kumar tells him, write well, impress her, that's one way of keeping this together. And this is what he wrote. In the end, after trying very hard, art is a hydra-headed monster, a medusa with snakes in her hair and sting in her tentacles, a monster gorgon that transfixes people, turning some into jelly and others into stone. Art is an exotic courtesan, the original Mata Hari, a black widow that brings artists to their knees and spares no one in its hungry quest to take over this world, its many riches, and its soul. So you have different people with different takes on what the art world is. But the fact remains is that the most difficult question to answer still, and I think it's important that it remains unanswered, is what is art?
Going a little off tangent, you also spoke about standing in front of abstract art and interpreting it. Something I've done that quite a few times. I've looked at abstract art and wondered, okay, am I missing something here? I look at impressionism and even magical realism and surrealism, and I look at it and I'm like, okay, I can understand this. But abstract art has been something that I've struggled to understand. But recently when I read Against Interpretation by Susan Sontag, I also felt that, okay, you know what? Maybe not everything needs to be interpreted. Maybe it is beautiful in its own way. So I wanted to know, like, do we stop interpretation altogether as the viewer or the observer?
I think it's important not to have prescriptions of any kind as far as art is concerned. And art should have multiple approaches in terms of its appreciation, multiple meanings that can be taken. And I don't want any prescriptions, and I don't think it serves art very well. As far as abstract art is concerned, it's probably the last bastion which somebody in their aesthetic journey needs to climb. But if for a moment you were to just think of it simply as music, if you listen to classical music, there are no words quite often. What you're hearing is pure sound. And you're hearing something more than sound, but you're not aware. It's not just random sound that's being made, it is sound of a particular kind, which comes from a particular person, and it is conveying so much more to you without having to explain anything. Is it possible for us to look at something visually and appreciate it in a similar manner? That, I think, is probably the last bastion. Not everybody can come around to that, but if you do it, you are lucky, because abstract art can be compelling. I, for example, had a hard time initially to respond to the works of Mark Rothko. Mark Rothko's works put together are there in chapels, in churches, and they form a church by itself. Just the works of Rothko is the church. So there's something very spiritual about his abstraction. We have Gaitonde, Vasudev Gaitonde in India. His works are, the first time I saw it, I thought it was a distressed wall. But I gradually got to appreciate what Gaitonde is all about, and his works are absolutely magical. It's a different matter that they commend. I mean, the last price of a Gaitonde was 30 crores, but I'm just saying, the point is that, I mean, okay, abstract art has value.
No, certainly. And I think maybe there will also come a time when I learn to. I mean, I do appreciate all art. Sometimes I think, like I said, I look at it and I think, okay, maybe I'm missing the point here about this specific movement. But also circling back to the paragraph that you read is one of my favorite parts in the novel, because so many metaphors, so beautiful. And Anjana is one of the characters I really liked. Another character that I could really relate to was Pravina. And I think there is a point where she is faced with a certain, she's faced with this moment where she's questioning how is it that a lot of her male friends get to have their own solo exhibitions, but it's not reaching her. They have their solo exhibitions, and sure, their art is good, but it's not great, she says. And I was very curious to know about the gender politics and even caste politics involved in this sort of an art community.
Okay, as far as gender is concerned, it is historically proven. If you look at how the market responds to women artists, their prices are lower than the male artists. Uh, you'll have Jeff Koons, I'm giving you some names of the international artists, or you have Souza in India or Raza in India. The kind of prices they command compared to, say, wonderful artists in India like Zarina Hashmi or Nasreen Mohammadi. The prices and their value and their appreciation is increasing, but it is not anywhere close to the male artists. So that's the market feedback. I think there are more and more people responding to the art of women, but I do find that what art women produce tend to be fairly particular, responding to their own particular issues, like the previous panel, what I heard. I mean, there are gender issues which women face, which obviously come to the fore when they practice their art. And perhaps a lot of some part of humanity doesn't respond very comfortably to these very directly addressed issues. They are powerful works. The only exception is an artist abroad called Louis Bourgeois. Her work is so powerfully feminine. It addresses so many issues, including of masculinity, and she's one of the superstars in the art world. So there is hope.
Could you repeat that name? Louis?
Louis Bourgeois.
Louis Bourgeois. Okay. Okay. Yeah, so.
And I'm sorry I keep coming back to the market because one of the things in the book, honestly, is this conflict between what is art, which we consider as something a little sacred, and the art market. And the art market is as fascinating as the art world. And trust me, I come from a business and finance background, and I've understood the art market as the last imperfect market that exists in this world. All other markets, including the stock markets and so on, are perfect markets. Price discovery is uniform, information flow is symmetrical, and most people know what is to be known, and pricing, and it's liquid and it is bought and sold every day. Art market is the complete opposite. Price discovery is depending on what two people keep bidding in an auction. So, and no artwork is like the other. Each of them is individual. It is not a fungible asset. So the art market is a very, very unique, peculiar market, which I believe needs to be celebrated because mankind otherwise has become so uniform and so boring in its ways. This art market behaves so badly in today's world, and it goes into billions of dollars. It's a huge market. And I think these kind of imperfect markets need to be celebrated. They're hard to understand, and there are difficulties in entering it because there are gatekeepers. And the most difficult aspect of art is who decides what is good. It is so subjective at one level. So there are all these complications. It just makes it a very, very fascinating place to be in. But there is a conflict between art for art's sake and the art market.
Yeah, art for art's sake and art for life's sake, I guess. I do have one more question for you, but I would also like for you to read something from the book if you, yeah.
It's hard for me to say as there is a central character in the book, but Maya, who is the artist in the book, and she leads a very bohemian life. She's into substance abuse. Her, as a daughter, there's a mother-daughter relationship, and the daughter suffers at the hands of Maya. But in the end, when we're nearing the end of the book, she has these few things to say, which I thought I'll just read. Consider a land that is a garden of weeds. Somebody carved out a nation, and the weeds were fine with it. Weeds survive without tending or nourishment. They have learned to spread, mingle, ride roughshod, and care little for presentation. This land of weeds is my country. The partition of this place was ugly and will remain a festering wound. When will they learn? You cannot tend weeds that have no respect for maps. They will capture territory till you submit to their reality. You cannot manicure this land in the name of civilization. If you want to look for character, look among these mongrel plants, these non-thoroughbreds which have not been granted pedigree. What a bloody mess they make. Who cares? They know the garden plant will die. The imports will stand in rows, flower and fruit, fuck the soil, and finally wilt. Weeds have names, but do you know them? It doesn't matter really if you don't. If you really like pansies and dahlias, don't bother finding out. I am a garden weed. That is what I meant to tell you. Maya, my name is Illusion. You may have noticed me. I was there standing among these flowering plants and manicured puffs, looking a little rough and a little randy. Somebody once told me I am trying to place you. I could see his confusion. I have tried to put my finger on it too. That really is my life and my art.
Thank you so much. That was very beautiful. I would love to source some questions from the audience. Does anyone have any questions?
Sanjay, this question is for you. I know you write very well and you write about the art world, but have you ever thought about, and I know there is humor in what you write, but have you ever thought about writing a full book on humor or even a murder mystery set in the art world?
I think humor for me works well when I'm not trying to be humorous. And if I were to consciously try to write a book which is humorous, I'm sure it may not succeed. Murder mystery in the art world is probably what my publisher would want, but whether I'll get around to it, I'll have to see. Yeah.
Just one question which Megha asked was whether there is any interpretation. I mean, you made it very clear that it's difficult to slot art in any particular format. But you did ask, she did ask you whether you could interpret art. And I think you went on to say that, you don't want it to be prescriptive. But the fact is, can we really understand what the artist wanted to convey, or is it something which you need to find out for yourself?
No, I think it's a fair question. What is unique about the art world is we tend to always inquire about the maker. Quite often, I mean, I also deal in the wine world, and most often when we are having wonderful wines, we never ask who made it. But in the art world, we always want to know about the artist. Francis Newton Sousa's decadent life informs his art. And you understand where Sousa's art comes from if you were to know what his life was. So in that sense, it makes the experience a little richer. So what I would commend is that never dismiss a work of art by itself. Always try and look at the practice of an artist over a period of time. Inform yourselves on what is it the artist is all about, what wakes her up in the morning, what puts him to sleep. Get an idea of the artist, look at the artwork over a period of time, and that really is the journey. And that kind of journey is something that you might find extremely rewarding, rather than just having to stand in front of a work, single work, and try to interpret it.
Any other questions? Any questions about wine? This is your chance to ask. Okay. Oh, yes, perfect.
Hi, Sanjay sir. My question is really, I'm from outside the art world, and I would really like to pick your brain as to what the inside of the art world right now is responding to the changing dynamics of the art world itself. In a way, there are two sides to it. If you look at it, AI has really stepped into the art world. You can say it's democratizing the art world. We all have access to interpret many famous artists' work and personalize it. At the same time, it's also bastardizing it. So my question really is that with your interaction with the artist and also your personal opinion, how do you think they are addressing this, and are they coping with it? Are they absorbing it? Or are they retaliating? Is
I think,
question.
good question. I think it's very early days as far as AI is concerned. AI is obviously impacting us in different fields. And obviously, if you can 3D produce just about anything, you can 3D produce a work of art. But I'll try and answer you tangentially. There is this artist who has a studio which has helpers. Somebody paints the background, somebody paints the faces, somebody colors the figures. All of them do different aspects of that work because the artist produces large number of works. So the question a particular reporter had was, who paints in the soul? Where does the soul for this work come from? And I think to that extent, it might answer what you're saying, that AI can produce a work of art, but for it to become art, does AI have a soul? So the moment AI has a soul, I think we can all gracefully retire to Mars.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions? That was a really good question, by the way. Any other questions? Okay, I have one question. So there is this part where Nupur looks at this artist and she says, "Why do you look sad?" And he says that, "Oh, someone told me that sadness makes me interesting." And I wanted to understand if this is still a thing. I mean, I know in the literary world, that there is a romanticizing of the tortured artist trope, but even in the art world, right? Like when you think about Van Gogh and all, there is romanticizing that. So, does that happen a lot in the Mumbai circle as well, or like in
So
the
I
Indian
would
art circle?
really refer to a quote by Graham Greene. Graham Greene used to write these spy novels, but he would write wonderful English. I'm a big fan of his writing. So he said that in the 30, 40 years of the Borgias, Italy produced Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, and the Renaissance. There was bloodshed, there was battle, there was trouble, but they produced these people. Switzerland, over 500 years, had peace and quiet. And what did they produce? The cuckoo clock. So I don't know. I mean, that is a very rough approximation. That do you need conflict to produce works of art? I'm not commending it, but it's a fair question. I mean, I don't have a definite answer. But does sadness make somebody interesting? I will need to get the answer from you people. But what attracts you? If somebody is happy all the time, or if there is a degree of melancholy, I don't know. Melancholy is something that attracts me to works of art. I don't know about people. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's the vulnerability and like anything emotional. I mean, I'm definitely drawn to it. Doesn't have to be sadness. We have come to the end of this session. Thank you so much, Sanjay. And
Thank
thank
you.
you,
Thank you so
everyone.
much.
You guys were wonderful. And yeah, we're done.